Well, it is so good to see all of you this morning. If we have not met before, my name is Cotter, and I am the Next Steps pastor here, and we're so glad that you are with us this morning. We also have a crew that is joining us online through the Church Center app and through YouTube, so can we make some noise for our online family? Wherever you guys are watching out this morning, we're just thankful to have you with us today. Now, our youngest son had his birthday a few months ago, and so we had a little birthday party for him. And he just turned 3, and so his favorite thing in the whole world right now is spending the night at his grandparents' house, which my wife and I like as well, because that kind of gives us a little bit of a break. And so that was kind of the theme for the for the presents that my parents were giving to him for his birthday. And so he got a new little suitcase that had his name on it. He got some toothpaste and a toothbrush, which I'd be a little frustrated by if I got for my birthday. But he was real excited about the toothbrush lit up, and so he's excited about that. He got a little blanket and some new PJs. And for my wife, Emily, and I, the number one thing we're focused on with our kids these days is just keeping them safe. That's all we're thinking about. We got a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, so they're just wild and going all over the place. And so whether it is the food they are eating or making sure their car seats are pointed in the right direction, making sure they're not tackling each other too hard during games of living room football, whatever it is, we just want to keep them safe. And so he's opening all these presents, and he's excited. My parents are excited. And then he gets to these new PJs, and he opens them, and he's really pumped. But I saw this label on the PJs that was not exciting to me. We'll put a picture of this on the screen. Look at this warning label. This is attached to clothes that he got. It says, "For child safety, garment should fit snugly. This garment is not flame resistant. Loose-fitting garment is more likely to catch fire." I feel like every piece of clothing is meant to catch fire unless you're a firefighter. And for me, I'm not putting my kids to sleep at night thinking, okay, it hasn't rained in how many days? And it's how windy outside? Okay, maybe the fire risk is a little too high. Let's put them in the fireproof PJs tonight. Never had that thought in my whole life. This warning label makes no sense to me at all. And we have never let him wear those PJs because I'm just kind of creeped out by them a little bit. Weird warning label. But there's a warning label in the Bible that does make sense, and it's been clear from the very beginning of the first book of the Bible, and that is to follow God's instructions. And so we see this right at the start with Adam and Eve, and their instruction was to not eat the fruit from the tree. They didn't listen, and they had to deal with the consequences of that, and so did many people after them. And that brings us to the man that we're going to focus on today, and that is Jonah. And so Jonah is famous. He has a whole book in the Bible named after him, but what makes Jonah so memorable is how terrible his decision-making was. He made some bad choices, and so his book starts out with God asking him to do something, and Jonah instead chose to do the exact opposite of what God asked him to do. We'll put this first verse on the screen. This is 3 verses into his book of the Bible, and it says, "But Jonah ran away from the Lord." Of all the people to run away from, he chose to run away from God who made the earth and God who made Jonah and knows everything and can see everything. So just an absolutely terrible decision. And despite his decision making, there's actually a lot of really cool things we can learn from the story of Jonah. And so we're going to hit the fast forward button on the first chapter in this book to get to what I want us to look at today. And so to recap the first chapter of this book, Jonah tries to run away from God and it doesn't work. He gets on this boat. He is later thrown overboard, and then he got swallowed by a huge fish. Now, as awful as it sounds, the Bible tells us that God actually sent that fish to rescue Jonah so that he didn't drown. But things were rough for Jonah. Once he started running away from God, things just got worse and worse for him. And that brings us to the section we're going to look at today. So Jonah has been on this journey of running from God. He is swallowed by this huge fish. And while he's inside of this fish, he starts praying to God. So everything in his life started getting bad the moment that he ran away from God. But everything in his life started to turn around the moment that he chose to pray. Choosing to pray was a huge moment for him. That's when he realized that God still cared for him, and he realized that God had great patience for him. And so the main thing that we're going to see in Jonah's prayer today is just how thankful he was. He was in this really bad spot, but when he pivoted and put his focus on God and on thankfulness, that got him back on the right course. So to give you the big picture of Jonah's story, the Bible says that after this prayer, Jonah escaped the fish. He ended up obeying God's original request. And so this prayer and his thankfulness, it was instrumental in changing Jonah's situation. So let's hop in here. We're in Jonah chapter 2. We're going to start with verse 1. We're going to have all of our verses on the screen this morning. You can turn there if you've got your Bible. We also have free Bibles every week out in the lobby right near where the coffee is. But let's check this out. Jonah 2, starting in verse 1. It says, "Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from inside the fish. He said, I cried out to the Lord in my great trouble, and he answered me. I called to you from the land of the dead, and Lord, you heard me." So Jonah had disobeyed God, and his disobedience caused this storm to come up. And then he's thrown overboard off of this boat. He's sinking in the water. He thought he was going to die, but then God rescued him. And God used a fish to swallow him as a way to rescue him. But even though Jonah ran away, God still rescued him. And so Jonah is in this fish, and he's thinking back over all that had happened, and he's choosing to focus on that rescue. He's grateful to still be alive, and being alive far outweighs all of the negatives that were still present in his situation. He chose to find something to be thankful for rather than complaining about all of those negatives. And I think the lesson for us is that in life we can choose to be frustrated by the things that go wrong, or we can choose to look for something to be thankful for. We can choose to be frustrated by the things that go wrong, or we can choose to look for something to be thankful for. And thankfulness is what Jonah chose to focus on here. His situation was still far from perfect. He's still inside the fish. He's uncomfortable and confused. He's probably a bit claustrophobic. He had a long list of things that he could have been complaining about. But he chose to ignore those negatives, and he looked for things to be thankful for. So here's our first point today, and we'll put this on the screen. Choose thankfulness over negativity. Choose thankfulness over negativity. When we're thankful, we see the good. We see the reasons to praise, the reasons to be joyful. Let's place verse 2 back on the screen. It says, "I cried out to the Lord in my great trouble, and he answered me. I called to you from the land of the dead, and Lord, you heard me." So Jonah is thanking God for the ways that God provided for him. He says that he called on God in his time of trouble, and God answered him. He says that he was dying, and he called out to God, and God heard him. And what stands out to me about this is that Jonah chose to see the good. He made a choice to see the good. He could have complained and asked God why he was allowed to suffer. He could have complained and asked God why he wasn't rescued sooner. He could have complained about all kinds of things, but instead he chose to be thankful for what God did do for him. He overcame those negative thoughts by choosing to be thankful. So a couple years ago, I got to hang out with my brother at my grandparents' beach house down here in Rehoboth, and it was just a weekend where it was just the two of us, and it was awesome. We spent the whole weekend bodyboarding and playing Xbox and eating Pringles. It was like a time machine back to when I was 14 years old. It was like the best weekend, and we got a photo of us so we can put up on the screen. This is my brother and I down at the beach. And that weekend was so much fun. My brother and I, we both have kids now, and he lives a few hours away, so we don't get as many weekends like this as we used to when we were kids. But it just reminded me of all the great memories that we had growing up, hanging out at my grandparents' beach house. And I love that house, but was anybody else creeped out by your grandparents' house growing up? Some weird things in grandparent houses. And this house in particular, it's like 100 years old. So the basement, I still refuse to go in the basement. It is so creepy. It is not a place I want to go. And so a few years ago, we were down there, and it was me and my brother, and it was my mom and my grandmother that were there hanging out. And we're getting ready to go to sleep one evening, and then we find a bat on the wall in my grandmother's bedroom. And so since my brother and I were the younger ones there, it was kind of our job to get rid of this bat. And it's their vacation house. There's like nothing there. We didn't know what to use. So we're looking through the closets, and we found these like really old school crab nets. You know, the long like wooden poles with a little green netting? And so we're real smart. We thought it'd be a great idea to grab those nets and try to catch the bat and get it out of the house. Well, it took like an hour to do that. It was ridiculous. And so we're chasing this bat around with these nets with holes in it, and it was ridiculous. And eventually my brother finally got the bat, caught it in his net, and sprinted it out the door, and we were so pumped so they could, I don't know, I guess go outside and go into somebody else's house. But we got it out of that house anyway. And so the only thing we had in that situation was these crab nets to get this bat out of the house. And listen, the tool that we have in our lives to fight negativity is thankfulness. The tool that we have in our lives to fight negativity is our thankfulness. So easy to get focused on our problems, the things that don't go according to our plans, to be focused on the things that we're frustrated by. The negatives are so easy to see. I feel like in life there's always a magnifying glass on all the things that don't go according to plan, all the things that are painful and difficult, the things we want to complain about. And when we're focused on those things, it's so easy to miss the good things that are happening, all the good things that God is doing around us. But when we choose to be thankful, we can overcome that negativity. Jonah was still in a bad situation. While he was praying this and choosing to be thankful, he was still in a bad situation. There were so many things he could have been upset about, but he didn't let that prevent him from seeing the good. He chose to let his thankfulness speak louder than the negativity. And when we're thankful, we can overcome negativity in our lives. Let's hop back in here, hopping back in to chapter 2 with verse 6. It says, I sank down to the very roots of the mountains. I was imprisoned in the earth, whose gates lock shut forever. But you, O Lord my God, snatched me from the jaws of death. Now, the first thing I got to say after reading this is Jonah's prayers are pretty awesome. Like, he's using huge words, talking about mountains and being snatched from the jaws of death. When I pray, I just use the word awesome a lot. It does not sound anything like this. It's amazing. So anyway, Jonah is here, and he's talking about when he got tossed out of the boat, and he's just kind of thinking about what that experience was like. You know, he's sinking down. He felt like he was going to drown, and then God rescued him. He says that God snatched him from the jaws of death. And here's our second point this morning. I think what we can learn from what Jonah is going through in this verse as he's praying to God is that thankfulness gives us perspective. Thankfulness gives us perspective. Jonah is looking back at that moment where he almost died, and he praises God for rescuing him. He sees how God intervened when things felt hopeless. And as he looks at what God did for him, it makes him aware of how serious his situation really was. He realizes how close he was to the end of his life. Jonah's thankfulness opened his eyes to see how God saved him. It gave him perspective to see his situation from a totally different viewpoint. Thankfulness gave him the ability to see that God was working for his benefit the whole time. Now, something that I'm constantly thankful for is our kids. My wife, Emily, and I, we've been married for almost 11 years. Super thankful for that. Thankful for our kids. We've got a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old, and they're just constantly growing. And we got a picture of them from last weekend that we can put up on the screen. So this is last weekend up at Funland on the boardwalk, and we had the pleasure of going to Funland with every single person that lives in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Every single one of them. They were all there. It was craziness trying to push a stroller through there. But we found this claw machine game. And normally, like, when we're going to the arcade with the kids, I always say, they always want to do the claw machine game. I'm like, it's a ripoff. You're not going to win anything. But this claw machine game is amazing. You pay $1 and you play until you win. It's awesome. So it's like guaranteed win. So this was a lot of fun. We had a great time last weekend. And I remember when our oldest son was really, really young. And so when he's really young, like, you know, they're really cute. You can hold them in your arms and they're not going anywhere. But then they kind of start to like stand up and crawl and move around. And once they start walking, like they're just gone. They're just running everywhere, like causing chaos. And I remember those first few moments when he would start to crawl around and grab onto furniture and stuff. And we were so excited that he was exploring everything around the house. We're also kind of terrified that he was going to get himself hurt by crawling on something that he shouldn't. And I remember one of his favorite things to do around that stage was to crawl to the edges of our room and use the furniture to stand up. And he just kind of stand there and be real proud of himself for doing it. And his favorite place to go in the whole house during that time was our TV stand. We had this TV stand that had these little glass panes on it. And so he'd go over to it and he'd take his toys and he'd start smashing the glass panes with his toy. And he loved how it made this really loud sound, and I was terrified that he was going to cut his hand open or something. And so this one morning, he goes over to it, and it was just nonstop, all morning. That was this one spot that he kept going to. And I think I set a record that day for the most time saying no before 8 a.m. because he just kept hitting this thing nonstop. And at that age, all he wanted to do was just explore and have fun. And as his parents, though, we saw the potential dangers that were in front of him, and we were trying to prevent him from getting hurt. We were trying to help him understand why those things are dangerous so that he could see the bigger picture. And what's so cool about Jonah's prayer here is that thankfulness is what helped him to see the bigger picture. Thankfulness helped him to see the bigger picture. He was intentional about looking beyond what was right in front of him and focusing on how God provided for him. His thankfulness helped him to see the danger that God rescued him from. And look, Jonah, he's still in this fish. He's still in a bad spot, a very difficult situation to be thankful in, but he still tried to see God's involvement even during that time. And because of that, he was able to see how God prevented him from dying. He could see that God was looking out for him. And look, it's so easy for us to see the bad things in life, our pains and disappointments, difficulties and struggle. We see those things when they're right in front of us. But we can't always see God's bigger plan. We can't always see God's bigger purpose for what we're going through. Seeing that is really hard, and it takes effort. It takes intentional thankfulness. It takes us trusting that God's looking out for us and trusting that he cares about us. But when we do look for ways that God is taking care of us, we're going to see it. Jonah had to put a lot of effort into looking beyond his situation to see how God was taking care of him. But when he did that, he could see so clearly God's hand in his life. And listen, God is looking out for you. God cares about you. He is there for you. Finding things to be thankful for, it helps us to see that and to remember that. Thankfulness gives us perspective. Let's hop down to verse 9. We'll place this up on the screen. Jonah chapter 2, verse 9. It says, "But I will offer sacrifices to you with songs of praise, and I will fulfill all my vows. For my salvation comes from the Lord alone." So this is the last part of Jonah's prayer. And what's so cool about this verse is that we see Jonah come to a place where he's aware of how he's fallen short, and now he's ready to make changes in his life. Now, the situation that he's been in, it all started with him choosing to reject God. He knew what was right, and he chose not to do it. And it got him into a bad situation, but now he's taking action to be a different person. He's being intentional about changing how he's living. And this is our third point this morning. We'll put this on the screen. What we can learn about thankfulness here is that it helps us to move forward. Thankfulness helps us to move forward. Jonah messed up big time, and he went through a lot of mess because of that. But here he points to a few actions that he's going to take to move forward in a better direction. He says that he will offer sacrifices to God with praise, and that he will fulfill all of his vows. What he's doing here is he's making real changes in his life and being proactive so that he doesn't make the same mistakes again. It's so cool how he puts action to his words here. He is thankful for what God's done for him, and that thankfulness, it's now causing him to live differently. That thankfulness changed him. And that's what thankfulness can do for us. It can help us to move forward. There are always things to be frustrated about, things we can be bitter about, reasons to be angry at our situation or angry at other people or frustrated with ourselves for bad decisions that we've made. But when we're thankful and when we're focused on the good things in life, then we can move forward. We can let go of our pain and our frustrations, and we can move forward. Let's look at the last line in this verse one more time. I'll toss this on the screen. It says, "For my salvation comes from the Lord alone." For my salvation comes from the Lord alone. Jonah had rejected God, and it landed him in a bad spot. But God rescued him even though he didn't deserve it. And because of that, Jonah made a recommitment here to live for Jesus. He said, I've disobeyed God. I've ignored how God said I should live, and the result of that was awful. So I'm going to change the way that I live. I'm going to live for God now. I'm going to obey him, and I'm going to praise him. And then Jonah says something awesome. He says that his salvation comes from the Lord alone. And that's true for us as well. Our salvation can only come through Jesus. Amen. It can only come through Jesus. We make mistakes. Look, we have times where we're ignoring the life that Jesus wants for us, where we're choosing to make up our own rules about what we think is best for our lives. And look, that's always going to lead us to pain. It's always going to lead to frustrations. It's not going to be fulfilling. But just like God was there for Jonah, he will always be there for us. And he's there to save us for our mistakes. So listen, if you're in a spot today where you've made some bad choices and you've chosen to live your own way instead of God's way and it's led to pain, just know that Jesus is still there for you. God does not abandon us. You might feel like you're drowning and that life is getting the best of you, but Jesus is still there waiting to rescue you, waiting on you to call on him and come back to him. Jonah went through a ton of pain before he decided to come back to Jesus, but Jesus was always there, waiting for him to reach out. Look, God does not say, you made too many mistakes. You waited too long to reach out. You disappointed me too much. He doesn't say that. Jesus is there waiting for us to reach out. Even when we've rejected him and chosen to go our own path like Jonah, he's still there for us when we call out to him. Jonah's thankfulness caused him to move forward and to make a change in how he was living. And today can be the day that you choose to make that change in your life. When you choose to say, I've had enough of living my own way. I've had enough of making mistakes. I am now ready to do things God's way. I'm going to live for Jesus. Each Sunday in our services, we have an opportunity for you to choose to start living for Jesus. And normally it's at the end of our message, but I want that moment to be right now. So let's all take a moment to close our eyes. Listen, if you're here this morning and you've not accepted Jesus as your Lord, as the leader of your life, make this the moment when you give your life to him. Make this the moment when you say, I'm not going to do life on my own anymore because it doesn't work. I'm going to start living for God and living his way. Listen, if that's you this morning and you want to leave your old life behind, you want to make a decision to start living for Jesus, I want to encourage you to raise your hand this morning. Raising your hand is a way to say, Jesus, you're now the leader of my life. I repent of my past. I'm leaving my old life behind, and I'm choosing to live for you now. God, you know the people in this room and the people online that made that decision this morning, and I pray for each one of them for endurance and for perseverance. I pray that you would fill them with immense knowledge about how great your love is, how great your grace is. I pray this in your name. Amen. Listen, if you made that decision today or recently and you've got any questions at all about it, I would love to chat with you after the service. Any one of our volunteers would love to chat with you about that after the service as well. There's one more piece of Jonah's story that I want us to look at this morning before we close out. So let's look back to this story starting in verse 7. Jonah chapter 2, starting in verse 7, it says, as my life was slipping away, I remembered the Lord. And my earnest prayer went out to you in your holy temple. Those who worship false gods turn their backs on all God's mercies. But I will offer sacrifices to you with songs of praise, and I will fulfill all my vows. For my salvation comes from the Lord alone. As Jonah's life was slipping away, he turned to God. He remembered the Lord. So he prayed, he sang songs of praise, he declared God's greatness. In his lowest moment, he chose to focus on all the great things about God. Thankfulness is life-changing. It can help shift our focus moment by moment onto the positives, and it can give us perspective that helps us to make a change in how we're living and what we're living for. So I want to close out today by looking at some practical ways that we can be more thankful. Some things we can do each day, in each moment that will help us to see God's hand in our lives. Things we can do to make thankfulness a habit so that God's love for us is always our focus. These are super practical things. So they may not all be for you, but maybe one of them is. So let's check a couple of these out. The first one is set a reminder on your phone to be thankful. I use phone reminders for everything. Does anybody else use phone reminders for everything? I use them all the time. That's the only reason I take my trash out on Tuesday nights. It's because my phone tells me to. That's how I remember to pay the taxes and change my air filters and all those random things. And so why not set a reminder on our phones each day to be thankful? And pick a time, 8 a.m., 1 p.m., whatever time you need it. Maybe it's in the evenings right before the kids are about to go down to sleep. And you're like, I need some thankfulness before bedtime, you know? Maybe it's before you go to work in the morning. Maybe you want it to be the first thing you see when you pick up your phone in the morning. So you set it real early in the morning, so as soon as you grab your phone, the first thing you see is be thankful today. Next one, tell your family that you're thankful for them. Tell your family you're thankful for them. Tell your kids, your parents, your spouse, your siblings, your grandparents. Make it a point each day to tell somebody in your family that you are thankful for them. And be specific. Tell them why you're thankful for them. Tell them how they make your life better. Tell them what they do that you appreciate. Next thing, when things don't go according to plan, look for the blessings. When things don't go according to plan, look for something to be grateful for. You get stuck in traffic, at least your AC's working. Your AC breaks, at least you got a car. Your car breaks down, well, now you got a really excuse not to go to work. You know? There's always an angle to look at our situations and find something to be thankful for. There's always something God's done for us that we can appreciate. Thankfulness changes our perspective on life, and it brings us joy. It pulls us out of our bubble, and it just reminds us of how big God is. It reminds us that we're so small, and yet the God of the universe cares so deeply about every detail in our lives. There's always something to be thankful for. We just need to find it and appreciate it and thank God for it.